You work hard for your donations and your revenue, whatever your revenue stream is. So we want to help you keep as much of that money in your pocket. Part of that comes to your credit card processing. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about things that you might want to think about when it comes to your processing, because you can negotiate. Now, not with all companies, but there is opportunity out there for you to really pay attention to the systems, the subscriptions that you have, and the credit card fees that you're paying. Because in a lot of cases, especially when you're processing a lot of volume, it can really make a difference switching to a different credit card processor. So I brought my friend, Jen Nielesky, on today's episode to talk to you about some things to consider when it might be time to make the switch, and what you might want to consider when doing so. Jen has a professional life that's a mix of hospitality and entrepreneurship. When she started a family, working nights was no longer an option because she didn't like missing nighttime baths, books, and snuggles. In 2018, she got involved in the payment processing space, and over the years has vetted several processing companies, forged relationships, gained deep knowledge about various systems, and have pre-negotiated rates for clients better than they can get on their own. Today, she proudly helps businesses with all their payment processing needs. Thanks to those who have allowed her to serve them in this capacity, she enjoys the good fortune of earning an honest income while also being present as a mom. She thanks her clients by ensuring they keep as much of their hard-earned money as possible, enjoying excellent service, and have a partner in payments for life. I never knew about payment processing and having a partner until I met Jen, and she has been alongside me for my entire business and has helped me in supporting a lot of my clients in saving money in their processing. Now, not everybody is going to be able to save money by making the switch, but it's important to have it in as something that you review on a regular basis, and it's not something that we all always do. So give a listen to this episode, and hopefully we can give you some tools and resources to think about what your credit card processing picture looks like, and is it time to maybe reevaluate the systems that you're using and the tech that's associated with it. Before we get into this episode, it is brought to you by our quiz. Should you DIY your website? If your website is not giving you all of the results that you want or need, or you're just looking for a refresh, or maybe your organization has experienced a ton of growth and it's time to make sure your website reflects that, take our quiz at thefirstclick.net/quiz. It will give you resources on if you're ready for a do-it-yourself, a do-it-with a consultant, or have it done for you, and give you guidelines and resources to help make that process as painless as possible. So again, thefirstclick.net/quiz. Let's get into the episode. You're listening to the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Sammy Vidal-Mulhern. Each month, we dive deep into a digital marketing or fundraising strategy that you can implement in your organization. Each week, you'll hear from guest experts, nonprofits, and myself on best practices, tips, and resources to help you raise more money online and reach your organizational goals. Hey there, please join me in welcoming my guest today, Jen Nielesky. Jen, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and this is your second time on the podcast, so I'm so excited to have you back. But for our new listeners who maybe didn't hear your last episode, would you just kind of share how you got into the credit card processing game and why it's so fun for you?
Sure. Well, I didn't wake up one day and just be excited about credit card processing. I just happened to know a long time ago somebody who did this pretty much for a living. And I found it pretty interesting that he had the ability to write the rate for a business. There was a lot of power, but also, how he made an income and supported his family was cool. So about 6 years ago, I was looking for a way to support my family and still be able to be a mom, but do something good for businesses. I'm an entrepreneur. And so I looked into becoming an agent in credit card processing. Eventually, it evolved into being a broker in that over these years, I've established a lot of relationships with different companies. I've vetted the ones that are good. I've learned a lot. There's a very big learning curve. And so today, what I do is with businesses and nonprofits is I help them with all things payment processing. And that involves educating them on what's a good rate, how do you get it, why does it matter, what systems to use. And some of my clients call me for things that I don't do, like vending machines and all kinds of other things. So it's I do kind of nerd out on payment processing. It didn't start off that way, but there's a lot of power to help people in an industry and in a world where people really don't know what they don't know. I get to be that person that helps them know what they don't know as it pertains to just this one little piece of their organization.
Yeah, and I think you and I have connected too on so many things. Number one, our passion for nonprofits, but also the fact that we are both in industries where so many clients come to us having been taken advantage by somebody else. And because they don't speak the language, because they don't know what they don't know, they're spending money on their processing that they shouldn't necessarily have. Not in all cases, but in some cases. So before we kind of jump into, because the purpose behind this episode is really to help you as a nonprofit keep as much money in your pocket. But could you kind of talk about the differences between like going through somebody like you to help them negotiate rates versus going through a bank that has a singular service versus maybe going through the Stripe, Square, PayPal kind of grouping of processing? Like, what are some key differences between those?
Sure. Well, first off, people like me, we are business owners. So we're 1099. That means that we own our book of business. And I share that with people because you want to know how the person you're working with is going to get compensated. So people like me, we're more of a partner with our clients because we get paid a small percentage of the profit of their processing for the length of it. A lot of people go to their bank for credit card processing. They're dealing with an employee. One of the things that businesses don't know is that these rates, they're all not the same. And so everybody's going to pay a different rate, and it kind of comes down to who is setting it. So you go to a bank or you call one of these companies up that's advertised on Google, you're dealing with the person who is an employee. They're going to get paid a bonus up front, maybe their hourly wage, but once they leave that company, they don't really care much about you. And then the third one, Square, Stripe, and PayPal, now that's a whole different industry altogether. And oftentimes when I ask somebody, who's your credit card processing person, I get an answer like Toast or Square or XYZ company. What I'm looking for is a person. The best case scenario is to have a partner in payments. It's kind of like if you buy health insurance, you might have a broker who knows all about health insurance. I was fortunate to have this wonderful woman named Christy come in my life. I don't even know how she did, but she was a broker in healthcare. And every year when I had to figure out what healthcare insurance I wanted, she would guide me to which company and which plan and for all the reasons why. And what I learned was that she knew which companies didn't pay out. She knew which companies were good with people with situations like mine. She gave me guidance and advice. She basically filled in that gap of what I didn't know that I didn't know. So a person who is tied to your business financially, that is an expert in this industry, will always be the best person to work with. And we're all over the place. There's tens of thousands of us. The best thing you can do is ask somebody who's in business, hey, do you have a credit card processing person that you like? My clients refer a lot of business to me because we have that relationship. If I wasn't good, they wouldn't. So if you ask your other business owning friends, hey, who do you have? Do you have a person? And they say, oh my gosh, you have to talk to Jeff. He is great. Go talk to Jeff. Jeff probably will take good care of you. He should, or they should know about systems that are pertinent to your industry, and they can give you guidance. Now, I hate to say it, but like the banks and like Costco, I hear this all the time. I'm going to get my processing from Costco. It's a little bit of a facade because we go in there trusting because it's our bank or it's Costco. We trust them. But what they're doing is they're outsourcing it and they're getting a cut. And so they're going to get the highest rate from you as they can because that's what they're going to get paid on. Then you're dealing with an employee that may or may not be at that bank in a couple of years. And so your relationship is with an institution, not with a person or a small business. Now, the thing with Square and Stripe and PayPal is they've changed the industry. Most of the systems nowadays, especially in the nonprofit space, are going to use one of those three processors. And I would say, like, if you're doing $20,000 or less in monthly processing, that's okay. But the way that their pricing structure is, it's kind of like a buffet in a restaurant. where they're going to charge the highest rate to hedge against some fluctuations. For the business or the nonprofit, that means you're kind of paying the highest rates you can in processing in the whole industry. Now, if you're overpaying by about 1% on $20,000, that's not terrible. But if you're doing $100,000 or $200,000 or more, it really adds up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the difference. It has to do with the rates and the rate structures, and it also has to do with the level of service that you're going to get from each one.
Yeah. Well, and you've taught me, I know I still have a lot to learn, but you've taught me a lot of things that, I maybe kind of knew and maybe didn't, but things, there's a lot of language around things that, kind of come across in the financial spaces. They make it sound too good to be true, like flat rate versus variable rate and things like that. So maybe what are some key, if we're looking at our processing, we're like, okay, maybe I want to look into this, right? Maybe I want to see if there's another opportunity out there for me. What are some key things that I might want to look for either on my statements or in my contracts to decide kind of how I want to move forward or where my next step might be?
Well, the first thing is to understand the different pricing structures. So I kind of alluded to that. What's become more popular nowadays is this flat rate, right? So Square, 2.6 and 10 cents. So if somebody comes to me and they say, "What's your rate?" I can't really answer because I don't use that pricing structure. If I was a restaurant, my pricing structure would be, I'm going to show you the wholesale price plus the markup. Whereas with the buffet style, it's more like everyone's going to pay the same price no matter what they use. So let me use that as an example, okay? Square and Stripe and PayPal, they charge the same rates no matter what kind of card is used. There are some cards that are as cheap as 0.05% and 22 cents a transaction. So if you're being charged by Square 2.6 and 10, but the cost is only 0.05 and 22, that's a lot of margin. Now, there are some cards that are higher priced, 3.5%, right? If all of your donors use American Express Black, Square is losing money. That doesn't happen that often, though. It's the law of averages. So, for example, you go into a restaurant, Sammy's Buffet, and the price is $50 flat. And the owner says, "You know what? It doesn't matter what you order, $50. And you brought your grandmother with you. Remember that commercial that's on right now where the guy sits down and Granny just got the mashed potatoes and he's like, all you're getting is mashed potatoes. And she's like, and gravy, right? So you go in, you pay $50. Granny gets mashed potatoes. You get the chicken dinner and your Uncle Ned gets the steak and lobster dinner. Okay. You all pay $50 each. The next month you go back to that restaurant, but it's under new ownership. And now they actually have a menu for each item. And so you look at the menu and you go, wow, Granny's mashed potatoes only cost $8. I see that's what the wholesale price was, plus $2 markup. It's only $10. We paid $50 for Granny's $10 mashed potatoes. And the chicken dinner is only $15 with a $5 markup. But then you see Uncle Ned and his steak and lobster dinner was $60. So the restaurant owner was losing a few dollars. That's how Square and PayPal and Stripe, they just say everyone's going to pay this because it has to be high so that fluctuation of cost, because of all the mix of the cards, they don't want to lose money. But you have no way of knowing how much of that is margin. In my experience, depending on the business or nonprofit, there's about 1 to 1.5% of excess there. So when I say, if you're doing, $10,000, 1% of $10,000 isn't a big deal, but 1 to 2% of $100,000 is. And so in terms of what you should be looking for, first of all, if you have the ability to choose the pricing structure, don't go with the flat rate. Ask them to put you on cost plus pricing. That means you pay what the cost is for that card, right? Plus a pre-negotiated margin, and that is negotiable. That's called your merchant service rate. And it's going to look like a percentage and a per transaction fee that will be on top of cost. One thing that I see sometimes is salespeople will say, how does 1.5 and 10 cents a transaction sound? Well, that sounds great. You want to make sure you ask them, is that going to be it? Or is that on top of cost? Because that's one of the things I've seen, unfortunately. There's a lack of ethics in the industry. That's usually on top of cost. So if your cost is coming in at 2%, then you're paying 2% plus what he just told you, 1.5 and whatever I said. Okay. For me, I usually price my businesses somewhere around about 1/4%. So that would be 2.25% and 10 cents a transaction on top of cost. That's very much in line with what a nonprofit would want to pay. The other thing too is some of the companies don't give charity rates, like Square is not known for giving the charity rate. But when you sign up with Stripe and PayPal or another processing company, like through a person like me, so long as you can show, the paperwork, there is a charity rate that Visa and MasterCard gives too. And I find a lot of nonprofits don't take advantage of that because A, they don't know. And then B, they're working with a company that maybe also didn't know or didn't ask for paperwork. So it's like a minor thing, but it shaves a few points off of the overall cost also.
Well, I think we forget because Stripe, PayPal, and Square are so large in this, like not even just in the nonprofit space, just in the business owner space in general, that we forget that there is a negotiating space with other companies that exists out there. So I like that you set that threshold, that dollar amount. So it's like, okay, yeah, once I'm processing over $10,000 or $15,000 a month, now it's worth my time and effort to take a look at what other options there might be out there. Because you would agree that when you're just getting started, it's just about having the systems in place that make it easy for you to take people's money until you kind of get to that space where you're processing at a certain level.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's pretty typical. It's easy to start. It's easy to set up, but it's costly after a while. So, for example, I'm working with a tribal organization, and all their programming, they have a normal POS, but I just found out that they also have this huge amphitheater where they do concerts. And because they were in a hurry, somebody just ordered Square. This is a nonprofit organization. They are literally nonprofit. And so they've got about 50 terminals deployed at this amphitheater, and they're doing $150,000 a show 3 times a week. It just kills me. They are literally paying the highest processing fees that they possibly can. And so I haven't told my contact how much that's going to equal. We're going to revisit it after summer. But that was a perfect example of they just needed to get something quick. Yeah. So Square fits that. But Square also, and PayPal and Stripe, they also fit the model with a lot of the apps. There's so many in the nonprofit space, so many platforms and apps designed to take in donations, run auctions and so forth. What you want to look for if you're doing big dollars is find those platforms that are processor agnostic. And how you do that is ask them, do you integrate with other payment processors or gateways? One that's really well known is authorized.net. There's all kinds of gateways. And so long as the payment processor you want to use can integrate with that gateway and then it can integrate with your platform, you're good to go.
Yeah. And I would say too, a lot of times like software systems won't make it obvious that they integrate with something like authorized.net. Or you might have to pay a little bit more. Like, for example, I do all my scheduling through Acuity. If I want to have payment processing through authorized.net instead of Square, I have to pay a higher monthly fee. So it is unfortunate in some of those cases. But at the end of the day, what you find is like your savings are still, once you get to that certain point, your savings are still better. And you have more security over your dollars. But I also want to touch on like, you might be thinking, well, my credit card or my donation page, my software allows me to capture the credit card fees from my donors. So I don't really need to work on a change. But this can integrate then in everything you do, from your events to your services that if you do memberships or anything like that, it can integrate across the board. So you don't want to just look at the dollars that are coming in through donations, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like the Indian organization with the amphitheater. They're selling drinks and tickets at a concert, right? And so they're using terminals. So all your payment processing, and in some cases, there might be a hybrid. One system that you really love might make you use Stripe, but everything else, you can make different choices, right?
Yeah. So if, like, what does the process look like? Like if I wanted to talk to like a credit card broker, are they called brokers? Are you called a broker?
It's kind of weird. I don't know. I sort of made that up. I don't know what.
Well, I mean, a broker is just somebody who represents.
I relate to that because of how I operate in terms of like, you tell me what you need and I'm going to give you all the advice. And so it's kind of like broker consultant. In the industry, though, you might look for like a merchant services agent, or, you can ask around for basically, if you talk to 10 different businesses, somebody is going to say, I have a guy, right? Or a girl. And you want to ask, do you work with somebody who does all your payment processing, or who does your credit card processing for? If they say it's Toast or, our bank or what, stay away from that. You're looking for them to say, oh, I have kind of like what you do for me. Oh, I've got a girl. You got to talk to Jen.
Yeah.
And it might take a while. There's people across the nation, and there's some really good people. I have a pretty good network, but they're all over the place. Obviously, I would be happy to work with anybody, but if somebody wants somebody locally, they can also go, for example, look at the Chamber of Commerce. They can go look at if there's any BNI networks, usually BNI, which is Business Networking International. They kind of vet people. So if there's a merchant services person in that group. And one thing you want to ask is, do you only sell one company, or do you have access to more than one? If they only have access to one company and that's the only thing, a lot of times, that doesn't mean it's the best thing. So try to find somebody that has access to more than one thing, and also try to find somebody who works with clients that are also in your niche, because there's a lot of knowledge that we carry. I work a lot with restaurants, bars, and hotels and resorts, and I know a lot of things about payment processing and systems that it would take a long time for them to know, just because of other people that I work with that have those experiences. So I'm oftentimes so people in the payment processing industry, if you'll allow them to be your partner, it can really add a lot of value.
Well, I think that's critical too, because there's so many different pieces of tech that have to interact, and different tech, like, point of sale, or like something that's going to activate people at an event, like those things that might have additional monthly fees. So I like that you mentioned that, because knowing what you need is going to help you in really kind of coming up with what that whole transition plan looks like. Mm-hmm. So if somebody is like, okay, I really want to evaluate all of my stuff, because we try to do this once a year in our business and evaluate all of our subscriptions. What are we paying for monthly? What can we keep? What can we get rid of? And your credit card processing is exactly that as well. It's a subscription basically that you're paying for every single month. Mm-hmm. So what kinds of things would I want to gather before I talk to somebody to make sure that I can get the best full picture of what it might look like to switch to something else?
Yeah. So in the profit world, I do something called a statement analysis. So I'll get a recent statement, somebody's merchant services statement, and I'll do an apple to apple comparison. That will show you what you're paying, what you're overpaying, if there's any trick fees. Oftentimes we find a lot of trick fees, unfortunately. Now, having said that, if they're using Stripe or Square or PayPal, it's cut and dry. They're not going to give you a statement. They're not going to show you what part is the wholesale and what part is the margin. They're just going to say it's a buffet, remember? In that case, what you want to do is organize your numbers. So on a per month basis, how many transactions did you run? What was the total amount processed? And pretty much that. Because the rates are published, we can usually do a statement analysis and tell you, based on experience, it's a hypothetical. Your cost would normally be, we're taking a guess around here. And then from there, we can show. So in the profit world, that's usually where we start. We do an analysis, break down the dollars and cents, because a lot of times in restaurants, they have to change out their system if they're going to use me. What we find, especially with Toast and Square, it's usually in the thousands of dollars a month. So if you realize that you're paying $3,000 or $4,000 a month more in processing every month, then, switching out that POS for $5,000 one time doesn't look so bad. If you're going to say $50 a month, you're going to go, I'm not going to change my system out for that. And so we always start with the numbers. How much is there to trim? So if you have normal traditional processing, when you have a merchant services statement, get that and get it to somebody that you're willing to, work with, and have them do a statement analysis. And if you don't have that, then get them the numbers and ask them to give you a hypothetical, and then you can decide.
And should they also come with a list of like, these are the other platforms that we process through? So like your auction software, or if you have a specific donation platform or your CRM, like, should they have all of that information to make sure that the integrations and things, like the solution that they provide, is something that you can utilize in other places?
And that's where the consulting part comes in. So, Yes, is the answer to your question. And they need to let us know if they're going to be flexible and changing, because if you've got all these systems and they make you use Square, then what's the point of this exercise at all? I don't even want to tell you, to be honest. I'd rather ignorance is bliss. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of a point where we go, okay, we were using this and it's all Band-Aid together because it was what it was. Now we want to see how we can aggregate it all. And so at that point, if you go, hey, you know what, we can save, 100, whatever, let's say 500, 600 bucks a month in processing. If we were to use, this person's processing, how could we do that? What systems would hopefully the person they're working with would be able to say, yes, I have a solution for that, which I do. And, right before I came on this podcast, just to see what kind of feedback I'd get, I went to one of my Facebook networks and said, hey, what do you guys suggest for nonprofit platforms that are processor agnostic? And people were throwing out a lot of, this was what we use. We love it. Here's how. This one has payment links where it's open. People could put in how much they want. Live events. We raised a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of knowledge, too, that can be gained by working with somebody who works, again, in your niche.
Well, and I think to your point, like what you're saying is like, okay, well, when we start our nonprofit organization, it's just about getting started. How can we get money in the door? We're typically using free CRMs or free giving platforms because we're just trying to get going. And then, you're right. Everything is kind of band-aided together. And as your organization grows and you start to bring in more money, you start to kind of refine those solutions. So my hope would be for you as listeners is that once you get to the point where you're, bringing in $20,000 a month or so on average for your organization, right? We want to look at it as an average over the year-ish, or you want to be seeing over 20,000?
It depends. I mean, if somebody's doing 20,000, but like lots of transactions, there's there's a balance, a mathematical
right. That's true.
where it makes sense. But the thing is, too, I'm sorry. I mean, you though, continue.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, my hope is that you would be at that point now where you're also streamlining the tech that you're using and like making it more simplistic. So there's less things that you're having to kind of throw together. So it's like a marrying of like bringing all of those things together. Anyway, but yes, the marriage between transaction numbers and dollar amounts.
Yeah. So there's not like an exact threshold. I kind of take it case by case. I just throw that out there because, like I said, sometimes using the platform that you want to use, if it's not a big dollar difference, but there, like you're saying, there's sort of economies of scale. There's a point where you go, you know what, it's costing us way too much. For example, you'll never see McDonald's using Square. Right.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, I think I love just how easy this thought process is, how you've broken it down and made it really easy for people to think about. I know some nonprofits are going to be starting their new fiscal year July 1st. This episode comes out right before that. So it might not be the right time for a switch right there, but I think definitely something to include, to bring to your CFO to make sure that even if you're not ready to have a conversation with somebody, to make it a part of your quarterly financial review and just see like, where are we at? Are we kind of hitting and getting closer? What are we spending on our processing? And paying attention to that number, I think, is really important because it is a cost of doing business, but that doesn't mean we just have to take it at face value.
Right.
Anything else that you want to add or that would be important or helpful for organizations to know as they're thinking about their processing?
I mean, the best advice I really can give is find a partner, find a human being who is vested in your business, who supports their family by taking care of payment processing for businesses or nonprofits. It's really great to have an ally. They'll act as a outsourced chief payments officer, and they're getting paid off of the profitability from your processing. So there's no out of pocket. It's really the best. It's the best case scenario. So if you can find somebody that you know, like, and trust, and really outsource a lot of that stuff to them, they'll find you the best deals. They'll find you the best systems. They'll watch over your business. And that really just allows you to do what you do best.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I'll, shout out you for, because this is also, I think, a reason why the two of us just get along philosophically so well with our businesses is we approach it the same, right? It's the same, like we have maintenance plans so that our clients don't have to contact the hosting company should something happen with their website. They contact me as a person. Finding that right partner means when something doesn't work in the tech side of it, something breaks, processing isn't happening like it's supposed to. Again, you have that partner that you call, so that removes the stress and the anxiety of it all. Because I know I can call you as a human. I'm not trying to call some phone bank somewhere that I might get to somebody in 15 to 20 minutes of sitting here on hold.
Yeah. Credit card processing is frustrating. It's terrible. Find somebody that will do it for you. It's the best thing to do. I hope that
I love
you find
that.
something great.
Well, Jen, so many helpful things here. If people want to connect with you, learn more about you, how do they do that?
Well, I'm pretty sure you'll post my contact information at the end of this. They're welcome to reach out, call, text, email. I'm happy to give guidance. There might be some times where I say, hey, I definitely can help you. There might be some times where I suggest they stick with what they have. I would really just rather give authentic advice, but I'm happy to give it. I like to nerd out on payment processing. So if somebody wants to talk about it, I'm happy to do that.
I love that. Well, Jen, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So much great information that Jen shared. So I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that it gave you something to think about. It's been so fun spending this whole month talking about donation pages for you. I hope that you are evaluating your donation page and getting it set up for success so that you can bring in as much money as possible and have your website working for you while you sleep. You can check out the show notes for this episode at thefirstclick.net/210210, and including all of the ways that you can connect with Jen if you have questions or if you're looking for a referral for somebody in your area that you might want to talk to, although she serves people all over the country. For now, please make sure you subscribe wherever you listen. We have some interesting bonus episodes showing up in July, and you'll only know about them if you subscribe. You can check us out wherever you stream your podcasts or also on YouTube at Digital Marketing Therapy. For now, I'll see you in the next one.